Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. Julian here for my second episode of my preseason content. I'm so excited to be back, guys, and bringing you guys content for the upcoming NHL season and obviously for your upcoming fantasy hockey season. If you haven't watched my channel before, I give you guys preseason tips as well as in the season tips on who to add and drop, so that you guys can build the best possible fantasy team and win your fantasy hockey championship. Before we jump into the content today, which is going to be about the off-season changes, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you do want to take that support for me to the next level, I do offer a Patreon subscription. It's very cheap, and you basically get to DM with me one-on-one and ask me any fantasy hockey related questions you want. And you get some early access videos content as well. Let's jump right into the video content now, guys, and let's take a look at some off-season changes. And the biggest off-season change, no doubt, was Mitch Marner to the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And obviously, this is the biggest off-season move by far. It's not even close. There wasn't that many huge moves this off-season. And Marner going to Vegas basically means he's getting top line and top power play time, probably with Jack Eichel on the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Eichel is not quite the goal scorer that Austin Matthews is, but I do expect Marner to still have an excellent season in Vegas because the opportunities are going to be there for him. I'm not expecting too much to change for Mitch Marner, but it does affect the Toronto Maple Leafs a little bit as well. They've kind of got a glaring hole on their top line now. The top line last year was Matthews, Marner, and Knies. This year, it's looking like it's going to be Matthews, Machelli, and Knies, unless Nylander plays on the top line with Matthew and Knies. But then Tavares doesn't really have any great wingers either. So there's definitely a glaring hole in the Leafs lineup, and that could affect their production a little bit overall. It does also mean that Morgan Rielly or some defenseman could end up back on the top power play in Toronto. That remains to be seen. But they were running 5 forwards on their power play with Matthew, Knies, and Marner on there, along with Tavares, Nylander, and Austin Matthews. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes up the Leafs lines and power play lines. The next big change is Nikolai Eers to the Carolina Hurricanes. And if Carolina plays their absolute best lines, it would be a top line of Ehlers, Sebastian Aho, and Seth Jarvis. They could end up putting Seth Jarvis to the second line or even Ehlers on the second line and then elevating someone like Svechnikov. But they don't seem to love Svechnikov over there, and they always somehow screw him with ice time. So Ehlers, I do think, is going to have himself a great season in Carolina. It's just Rod Brind'Amour, the coach over there, is hard to trust. He gives his stars really not that much ice time and plays third liners a lot. So it's a little bit scary drafting Nikolai Ehlers this year. We don't know yet where he's going to be going ADP-wise, but I am definitely a little bit hesitant drafting anybody who makes their way to Carolina. We saw it with Rantanen last year, where he just did not thrive in Carolina's defensive system and wasn't scoring a lot of points. I'd kind of like to see him play and see him produce first before I draft him this year. So unless he's going super late, I'm probably staying away from Ehlers in drafts. If he goes off, great, but if he doesn't, hey, I avoided a big bust probably this year for fantasy purposes. The third biggest off-season change, in my opinion, fantasy-wise, is JJ Peterka to the Utah Hockey Club, now known as the Utah Mammoth. JJ Peterka had a kind of breakout season last year in Buffalo, looked really, really good, and he's poised to have himself an excellent NHL career. In my opinion, that was a huge lopsided trade. Utah won that massively. Now, Peterka is an incredibly talented player and will likely immediately slot into their top 6 and probably top power play. He can very easily potentially end up a top 100 fantasy player this season. One effect of Peterka coming to Utah is it potentially kills Nick Schmaltz's fantasy value a little bit. If JJ Peterka does join the top power play, I imagine that it's Schmaltz that gets knocked off. But imagine a power play of Peterka, Cooley, Keller, Genther, and Sergachev. Oh my god, is that ever deadly. I like Purka quite a bit this year, and NHL has him ranked at 83, which I don't hate. Next big move is the Montreal Canadiens acquiring Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders. And as a Habs fan, this made me super, super excited. Noah Dobson is a very, very good defenseman, and I'm expecting him to have a solid fantasy season. That's not to say that he's going to get top power play time in Montreal. Unless Lane Hutson gets injured, he's not. But I'm still projecting about 40 points from him this year. He's going to get some power play 2 time in all likelihood. And he does shoot and block a decent amount. So I'm still projecting him to be a top 20 defenseman, but towards the bottom half of that top 20, almost around number 20. Sticking with the Habs trend, and Zack Boldzuk was a great acquisition from the Montreal Canadiens. They traded away Logan Mailloux to acquire him in this offseason, and Boldzuk had himself a great end of season last year. He's a type of dude who hits a lot and started really going off with those points towards the end of last season. If he can get himself good deployment in Montreal, I think he can have himself a semi-decent season. That's not to say he's a top 100 or maybe even 150 player, but he still can be a valuable fantasy asset. He's not going to get top power play time this year because that's probably going to go once again to Slafkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield, Demidov, and then Lane Hutson. And then if somebody gets injured, Patrick Laine probably jumps onto that top power play. That being said, I can see him playing on a line, it's Montreal's second line with Demidov, and maybe a center like Kirby Dach, or if Montreal trades for a center, even better. Either way, that's a pretty good second line playing with a guy like Demidov, and I can see Boldzuk putting up quite a bit of points this season. The next big move this offseason was Mikail Granlund to the Anaheim Ducks. And that's going to be a really interesting one to me. Because Granlund, depending on where he's played in the past, has either really, really done well or really sucked. For example, last year in San Jose, he had himself a phenomenal season. He was absolutely going off and putting up a crazy amount of points. He then ended up getting traded to Dallas and still produced pretty well in Dallas. Rewind a couple seasons ago, he was traded to Pittsburgh and absolutely stunk it up. Why? Well, he was put on what is like a third line in Pittsburgh, didn't get that much ice time, and just didn't really do much because his wingers kind of sucked as well. He's the kind of guy who thrives when you give him top minutes and power play time, but then starts to kind of not do that great as soon as he's no longer the guy. He's only getting like third line minutes with mediocre players. In Dallas, he wasn't playing with mediocre players, so he still did well. On Anaheim, though, it's going to be interesting to see what the lines are. Right now, Daily Faceoff has him on a line with Frank Vatrano and Ryan Strome. That's okay. That could be the second line in Anaheim, but they also have a line of Gauthier, Carlson, and Killorn, with a line of Kreider, McTavish, and Terry. There's a decent amount of talent in Anaheim. Nobody that's that incredible, but definitely quite a bit of talent. And I do think a guy like Leo Carlson is going to have a massive breakout this year. And Mason McTavish has been showing some signs of brilliance as well. So, am I drafting Granlund? I'm going to wait and see how those preseason lines look. If he's playing first or second line and top power play, I don't mind it. Otherwise, I'll probably wait until super late to draft a guy like that, or just avoid drafting him at all. Another big offseason move was Trevor Ziggers getting traded to the Philadelphia Flyers. He joins his good buddy Jamie Drysdale over there in Philly. Is this the change of scenery he finally needed to get his career kind of going? I hope so. He's a really talented kid, and I want to see him succeed. I think there's a very good chance he has a nice breakout year this year. And if Philly gives him top 6 minutes and top power play time like they absolutely should, I do believe that they'll really be trying to get this guy to break out of his shell a little bit. That's his best shot to succeed. And if he does get, all that ice time and that power play time, he's definitely in a great spot. Next big move is John Gibson to the Detroit Red Wings. And NHL has him ranked as the number 200 fantasy player. I do have him ranked a little bit lower than that. The reason for this is I think he split starts fairly evenly with Cam Talbot, since Cam Talbot is still a very capable goalie. And honestly, Talbot might even get more starts than John Gibson just because John Gibson is always nursing some kind of injury, so he probably does miss some time due to that injury proneness. On the flip side of that trade, he was traded for Mrazek, but more than likely, Mrazek's probably going to be the backup to Dostal in Anaheim, so I'm not really seeing him having too much value in Anaheim being too affected there. Dostal is the starter in Anaheim, and John Gibson maybe gets half the starts in Detroit. Another big one is Matias Machelli of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's someone who I actually really like, and I think was a really great move by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a very talented kid and had a really tremendously bad season last year. I'm projecting him to bounce back in a big way this year, probably playing on the top line with Austin Matthews in Toronto. That's definitely where he's going to start, and there's a chance that he gets top power play time as well. There's a void on that top power play left by Mitch Marner, and if they decide not to fill it with a defenseman, which they didn't do last year, it could be Matias Machelli ending up on that top unit. If that is the case, he definitely could have some serious fantasy value. We're going to have to wait and see what the preseason lines look like and power play lines look like, but Machelli could be poised to have a massive breakout this year. Next decently big move is Pew Sandin going from Vancouver to St. Louis. Now, I don't see this like moving the dial that much, and I don't really see him being that valuable for fantasy, but the dude has always been able to produce when there's injuries. So he's probably going to start off as like a third line center. Then if there are any injuries in St. Louis, this dude's probably going to need to step up. And knowing his history, he probably will step up and do pretty good. He's someone who's always been able to do that when people go down with injuries. And he's someone that I'm probably not drafting, but I'm keeping my eye on if there are any injuries and potentially scooping him up. Chris Kreider is another guy who was traded to the Anaheim Ducks this offseason. They really do have a pretty decent lineup this year, and he's an interesting one. Just like Granlund, his value is going to depend really where he ends up in the lineup and just how much power play time he gets. There's actually quite a bit of talent now in Anaheim, so it's kind of very difficult to predict right now whether it's going to be first line, second line, third line. It's probably going to be one of those three, but yeah, it really depends where he ends up and how much power play time he gets, and that'll really dictate if he has any value at all. Evander Kane is a big one. He has a great opportunity this year, in my opinion. He should immediately jump straight into a top 6 role in Vancouver and potentially top power play as well. If he can stay healthy all year, he can have a great season, because what's great about Evander Kane is he shoots and he hits quite a bit, giving him a safe floor every night. I'm excited to see where he does end up in the lineup in the upcoming preseason lines, but I'm expecting this guy to go super late in fantasy drafts, and I think he could end up being a massive steal. Look for him to potentially be one of my late round draft steals. If this guy can actually stay healthy all year, I kind of like his upside. The next one is Jonathan Taves to his hometown team, the Winnipeg Jets. And in his heyday, Jonathan Taves was very effective on the power play. With Ehlers gone, does he potentially get a shot on the top unit this season? I'm not sure. It probably does go to Perfetti, but there's obviously a chance that Jonathan Taves does take that step on the top unit. Other than that, though, he's probably the second or third line center at best, whatever you want to call Lowry. It's also worth noting that Captain Adam Lowry had hip surgery with a timetable of 5 to 6 months this offseason. That gives Taves an opportunity to make an early impact upon the top 9 forward group right away, and probably starts as the second line center realistically with Lowry gone. So he can really make an impact early. Once Adam Lowry comes back, he might, be less relevant, but I really don't absolutely hate this guy early on. It's going to be interesting to see how he looks after taking a couple of seasons off. Jonathan Drouin to the New York Islanders is not something I'm excited about at all. Drouin playing with Montreal never was great, missed a lot of time, and then he went to Colorado, still proceeded to miss quite a bit of time with injuries, and even playing with McKinnon, yeah, he had himself some pretty decent seasons, but in New York, he's not going to be playing with that level of talent anymore, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to continue to produce fantasy-wise. He really doesn't put up a lot of peripherals, so you're relying on points here. I'd rather see him do it first before I actually draft him. Mason Marchment to Seattle is a decently big one. Seattle has basically 9 middle 6 forwards, and I think he's going to be pretty mid, just like everyone else in Seattle. If he ends up on a power play, he could be okay, but there's not really any guarantee that he does, given how many middle 6 forwards that can be on power plays that they have. And I'm not overly high on Mason Marchment this year. He's not someone that you have to must draft or anything like that by any means. Victor Arvidsson is a kind of big one. He really disappointed last year. I really was expecting a lot more from him last season, and he really disappointed me. I thought he was going to have a great bounce back season. He didn't from that injury, and he didn't really get any power play time either. So, it didn't help, but Arvidsson really did disappoint. But there is a chance that he bounces back with a new team, the Bruins, this year. And there's a good chance that he gets top 6 minutes and top power play time as well. With the lack of talent right now in Boston, we're going to have to wait and see how the preseason lines shake up. Because if guys like Poitras make the team, maybe he doesn't get top power play time. But if he does, I do think there's a chance that he bounces back a little bit. I'm still not overly high on him. I'm drafting him super late in deep leagues, if I am drafting him at all. But he's definitely someone to look out for a potential bounce back. Vladimir Tarasenko is somebody who absolutely sucked last year. Can he turn his career back around in Minnesota? Well, if he plays on a line with Boldy and Rossi, for example, there's definitely a chance. But I do need to see it first. I'm not drafting this guy unless it's an ultra deep league, because he was really awful last year. Maybe the change of scenery can help him, but that remains to be seen. Then you got an interesting case in Dakota Joshua, who had a pretty good season a couple years ago, getting about a point every 2 games or so. But what really made him fantasy relevant in Banger Leagues especially was the fact that he hit a lot. Now last year, Kiefer Sherwood just went crazy in hits, and he really took over that role in Vancouver. So Dakota Joshua, well, for one thing, he missed about half the season last year battling cancer, but he's good to go now, which was so cool to see. And when Dakota Joshua got back, he was relegated to more of a 4th line role, whereas before he was kind of a 3rd liner playing 2nd line sometime when, guys got injured. So really, he needed a change of scenery, and he got it in Toronto. Now in Toronto, he likely probably gets 3rd or 4th line minutes. It's going to be interesting to see where he actually ends up in the lineup. But if he does start to throw the body a little bit, he'll at least have some streaming relevance in categories leagues where you need to catch up in hits. I'm excited to see how this guy does this year, though. John Klingberg in San Jose. This is an interesting one. I'm not drafting Klingberg unless I'm in an ultra deep league and there's really no defenseman left. But Klingberg realistically does have a shot to man the top power play in San Jose this year. If Sam Dickinson does not make the team, I'm projecting Klingberg to man that top power play. Obviously, in San Jose, it's not going to be the best power play in the world, but power play points are important to raise a defenseman's rank overall when you're drafting them. So he definitely could put up some points if he does secure that spot. Keep an eye on the preseason. If Sam Dickinson does not make the team, Klingberg can maybe be somewhat valuable this year in fantasy. I'm just not expecting too much from him. Keandre Miller on a new team, the Carolina Hurricanes. It's going to be kind of interesting. I have him as my 60th best defenseman this year, around that range. He's not particularly valuable, but he does put up okay peripherals, and he should have a much better plus-minus this year on the Carolina Hurricanes. If you're in a super deep league, he definitely is a serviceable 3rd or 4th defenseman, but he's definitely not ideal to have on your team if there's plenty of better defensemen up there above him. But again, if you're in an ultra deep league, he probably is going to be owned, and his peripherals are good enough to make him, a top 75 defenseman. Andrew Mangiapane is an interesting one as well. He's probably going to play on the top line or 2nd line in Edmonton with either McDavid or Draisaitl. Does that always translate to fantasy points? No. They put Connor Brown there, they put Dominic Cahoon there a few years back, and they didn't really do anything. So there's no guarantee that he's going to pop off with points, but he's a little bit kind of like a Hyman-style player, and Hyman does do well with McDavid, so there's definitely a possibility that Mangiapane does well. That being said as well, there's not going to be much power play time for Mangiapane, and that is where a lot of McDavid and Draisaitl's players like Hyman and Nugent Hopkins, their points comes from. So I'm not overly high on Mangiapane, but especially if there's some injuries, there definitely could be some room for him to jump onto the power play and then potentially gain some value. And finally, Artur Celovs. I like Artur Celovs a lot. I think he's actually a pretty good goalie, and Pittsburgh did a great job by acquiring him. Now, he's probably going to start off as the backup in Pittsburgh to Tristan Jarry. But we all know over the past few years, Tristan Jarry has not been very good. So as soon as he starts to be inconsistent, Celovs is going to get himself more and more games. I see him kind of like a 1B option in Pittsburgh, and if he plays well, could even be their starting goalie and get most of the starts at some point this season. He's probably going to go really late in drafts this year, and if you are really desperate for a goalie that could get some major starts and you're in a super deep league, you could draft him. Otherwise, he's probably going to go undrafted, and you can keep a close eye on him. If he takes over for Jarry and you need a starting goalie, he could be an option. I'm not expecting Pittsburgh to win a lot of games this year, so be wary of that. But he's definitely someone who has the potential to take over as the starter this year. And that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hope you're enjoying my preseason content so far. I'm going to be dropping content every single Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So stay tuned for that. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.